Buju nindenawe meganog, indonja ba beisho, ininwewi gichigami, inda beisho Anishinaabe gichigami. Abby Fergus, Indigenous Cause. I just said, hello friends, I come from Lake Michigan. I now live on Lake Superior. My name is Abby Fergus. I'm excited to be sharing lessons I have learned over the past 3 years of doing carnivore coexistence work with the Bad River Band of the Lake Superior tribe of Chippewa Indians. To illustrate the importance of relationship building and rematriation with Indigenous people of Turtle Island, now called North America, I will share about my research and knowledge-building experiences with the Mashkiiziibii Natural Resources Department, MNRD, of the Bad River Tribe. This work is grounded in a long history of companionship between Mayingan, Grey Wolf, and Anishinaabe-Moan, and Anishinaabe, literally the first or spontaneous man in Anishinaabe-Moan. The Creator put Mayingan and Anishinaabe together as brothers to travel the earth and name all of creation. Mayingan and Anishinaabe lived together and grew close, but when their job of naming all of creation was over, the Creator separated the two, but told them that they would walk parallel paths. Through my work with Bad River, I have learned that not only are Mayingan and Anishinaabe connected, but biodiversity loss and climate chaos are directly connected to the global loss of Indigenous language and culture. Climate chaos and biodiversity loss are tied with Indigenous culture and language loss is the way in which Indigenous language and cultures are shaped by and embedded with ecological understanding. A testament to Indigenous knowledge and stewardship is the state of Turtle Island when European colonists made contact. Contrary to the images of empty wilderness compelled by many early Western naturalists, it is thanks to the stewardship of Indigenous peoples that Turtle Island hosted biodiversity that is unfathomable to us today, as we fight over topics such as suitable range and tolerance for carnivores. I have had the opportunity to learn Anishinaabe-Moan slowly by integrating the language in my work and learning the names of members of creation I encounter, from Mayingan to Mayingan-a-Mininitig, a honeysuckle species known commonly as wolfberry or snowberry in English. Teachers including White Earth Elder Zashigid Nuding, Bob Shimmick, Bad River Elder Edith Leoso, and Lakota Elder Skabewis, Paul Demain, have taught me how to think of the real meaning of Anishinaabe-Moan words, rather than just their English translations. An example of how we can study traditional knowledge held by Anishinaabe is to study common root words in Anishinaabe-Moan. Mayingan-a-Mininitig translates into wolf-berry tree, and grows in open forests and prairies across Anishinaabe ceded territory. I hypothesize the reason this plant was named after Mayingan is the ecological benefits the plant provides for many other members of its ecosystem, similar to the way that Mayingan balances and improves the health of ecosystems. Mayingan-a-Mininitig provides food, cover, and nesting for birds, small mammals, and browsers. Whether or not my hypothesis is true, my line of thinking exemplifies how learning Anishinaabe-Moan and Anishinaabe culture expands my lens and understanding and thus helps me fulfill my responsibilities as a tribal wildlife specialist and as a student of carnivores. The ecological knowledge held by Indigenous people is not yet honored widely enough. Some of my teachers, including White Earth Elder Zashigid Nuding, Bob Shimmick, and Glyphwick Mayingan biologist Peter David, were deeply involved in the formation of the Minnesota and Wisconsin state wolf plans. Both spoke about the way state and federal agencies have ignored Anishinaabe treaty rights and governmental trust responsibilities that exist because of those treaty rights. Both Mashkiiziibii and Peter David have outlined the shared fate that Anishinaabe and Ma'ingan have clearly faced since colonization and before. For example, the forced assimilation of indigenous children has occurred in state-run boarding schools up until the end of the last century, as Ma'ingan was nearly eradicated from most of Turtle Island until protections were put in place, also at the end of the last century. Rather than learning and doing rematriation around this history, states excluded tribes from decisions around wolf conservation and hunts for the most part, and Peter David has probably taught some of you about this history this week and over the course of his career. I am using the term rematriation rather than repatriation intentionally, as described by the indigenous organization Sierra Seeds. The indigenous concept of rematriation refers to reclaiming of ancestral remains, spirituality, culture, knowledge, and resources, instead of a more patriarchally associated repatriation. It simply means back to Mother Earth, a return to our origins, to life and co-creation, rather than patriarchal destruction and colonization. Ecosystems are healthier where indigenous language and culture exists and is fostered. Modern restoration projects that Mashkiiziibii Natural Resources Department and other tribal agencies are responsible for exemplify the continued presence of Anishinaabe stewardship. Some successful examples include the MNRD Piping Plover Monitoring and Restoration Project on Schwamigan Point within the reservation, Glyphwick and MNRD efforts to study and restore monoman or wild rice on and off reservation, and the collaborative restoration of Augusk, the sharp-tailed grouse. MNRD participates in the Muckwa Barrens. These projects each entail some success by state and federal agencies in adequately collaborating and consulting with tribes. Yet, the Great Lakes states have yet to formally endorse co-management with the tribes, according to Busion and Gilbert 2009. Last week, I checked in with John Gilbert, head of Biological Services with the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, and he said that this unfortunately holds true 11 years later. Indigenous peoples have lessons to teach as we address climate crisis and mass extinctions. The colonization of Turtle Island and the rapid destruction of habitat and displacement of indigenous peoples has been called one form of climate change that indigenous peoples have survived. Indigenous declarations have called for respect, inclusion, and attention to indigenous knowledge for decades. Research does exist to guide us as non-tribal academics, scientists, and government employees to enter into rematriation by working with indigenous peoples and respecting their knowledge and life ways rather than assimilating them to Western ways, which have fueled our current climate and extinction crises. As examples, I have included the International Society of Ethnobiology's ethics statement and a resource for the COVID-19 pandemic from Glyphwick. Bad River Tribal Chairman Mike Wiggins Jr. has described the way that me and my predecessor, Lacey Hill Castern, have run the Mashkiiziibii Wildlife Program as mimicking Anishinaabe culture. I have learned to incorporate both Western science and indigenous knowledge in my carnivore coexistence work by studying with diverse lenses. I have learned about culture, ecology, human and other animal behavior, treaty law, living on the land, and so much more by collaborating with carnivores, scientists, livestock farmers, and tribal members. I will now illustrate how drawing from diverse knowledge systems can lead to more holistic carnivore coexistence by discussing the different projects I've collaborated on with the Bad River Tribe over the past 3 years. I began my work with the Bad River Tribe in 2017 as an intern for MNRD. My assignment was to gather input for the update of the Mayingan Relationship Plan. I interviewed wolf biologists, livestock farmers, and tribal members about their attitudes toward wolves and asked further input on the tribe's Mayingan Plan. The Mashkiiziibii Mayingan Relationship Plan outlines protections for Mayinganog within the reservation and within a 6-mile buffer zone surrounding the reservation. The pack data in this map may be outdated, but the red line shows the Mayingan buffer zone in which the Bad River Tribe is to co-manage Mayingan with the state. The polygons denoting wolf packs and the topological features help show us why this buffer zone is needed to protect reservation Mayinganog. Natural corridors such as the White River and the Potato River guide Mayingan and other carnivores to follow deer and other natural prey off reservation, a political boundary they don't regard. The research I conducted through interviews and literature review as an intern informed the update I published as MNRD's new wildlife specialist in 2019. The update incorporates the latest science and community input into the plan. Partnering with tribal people and agencies as a white person requires prior education and mindfulness in the history of colonization and an effort to build good relationships moving forward. I attribute the success I had in my internship and forward building relationship with the tribe to the fact that I was able to secure funding to support myself and not burden the tribe. I was able to show reciprocity to the tribe by doing this research in return for the education I received in natural resources and wildlife. And the tribe owned all the information I gathered or produced and ultimately approved and vetted the Mayingan Plan through tribal council and community input so that the information could be kept in a good way by the tribe throughout the process of producing the Mayingan Plan. On January 31, 2020, Bad River Chairman Mike Wiggins Jr. welcomed scientists, tribal citizens, elders, farmers, veterans, and Chequamegon Bay community members to the 2020 Mashkiiziibii Mayingan Symposium at the Northern Great Lakes Visitor Center on Anishinaabe Key, Ojibwe land. During this 3-day gathering, ahead of the anticipated 2020 delisting of the gray wolf, tribal, state, and federal employees, as well as citizens of the Chequamegon Bay area, came together to discuss Mayingan and the varying relationships and responsibilities we hold with and to Mayingan. I co-organized the Mayingan Symposium with a team from the Bad River Tribe, the Red Cliff Tribe, and Glyphwick as part of my graduate schooling agreement and reciprocity with Bad River, who has been funding my master's education. The Bad River Tribal Council conceived of the symposium because they saw a need for Anishinaabe-centered conversations about Mayingan after Anishinaabe tribes stepped away from discussing Mayingan for a while following the painful experiences that led up to modern Mayingan hunts in the Great Lakes in the early 2010s. I heard firsthand from academic scholars and federal wildlife managers how the symposium held lessons that touched them and taught them. For example, one biologist who had recently lost a dog companion to a gray wolf shared that the symposium helped him process that heartbreaking loss and come to the conclusion that the biologist would not be mad at Mayinganog wolves for doing what they are meant to, defending their home. The Mayingan Symposium allowed some of the Great Lakes tribes to reflect on recent history and prepare for what Bad River and other tribes are doing today, making our opposition to the delisting of the gray wolf known, and building upon our shared understanding of Mashkiiziibii with livestock farmers and other neighbors. The symposium also allowed the scientists, farmers, and community members in attendance to interact in deeper ways than presentations alone allow, thanks to breakout sessions on topics like carnivore coexistence on livestock farms and Mashkiiziibii returning to certain landscapes. Currently, I am wrapping up my master's education in carnivore coexistence. I employed a gold standard crossover design that Adrian Treves and others have been developing through the Carnivore Coexistence Lab. I researched the effectiveness of flaggery, the white flagging depicted, and flox lights, the yellow device depicted, at reducing carnivore visits to wildlife corridors, which lead up to or near livestock pastures. Currently, I'm still in the process of conducting the data analysis using a Hills Armitage ANOVA, so I won't go into further detail regarding the deterrent research at this time. My master's education, in partnership with the Carnivore Coexistence Lab and in the Nelson Institute of the University of Wisconsin-Madison, came about from a tribal council directive for the Mashkiiziibii Wildlife Program to focus on carnivore coexistence with farms surrounding the reservation. The Tribal Council recognized this form of outreach and collaboration had the potential to better protect Mashkiiziibii and other carnivores in coordination with the Mashkiiziibii-Mashkiiziibii Relationship Plan and Buffer Zone. I would not have been prepared to embark on the demanding mixed methods research for my master's degree if it wasn't for the relationship building and learning I was able to do with Bad River starting 2 years prior to my enrollment, in which I have outlined today. The research I've put into my master's education is also what informed the messages I've shared about the role of Anishinaabe language, culture, and knowledge in preserving environment and biodiversity. In the second chapter of my thesis, I argue further why we must finally learn from the historic failure and weakness of the North American model of wildlife conservation, and from the death and pain Western ways have brought upon Indigenous people and the natural world alike. My thesis defense is planned for December. If you are interested in attending my defense to learn more about my carnivore coexistence research on deterrence or in being updated on the availability of my thesis, please email me at wildlife@badriver-nsn.gov. I want to say miigwech to some of my teachers because it's not possible to say miigwech. Thank you to all of them. This is a picture of Gimiwan. He is the breeding male of the Mashkiiziibii pack, and his name means it rains, like the weather on the day that I met him when we collared him. I have a picture of him with his mate Ngweyab, which means rainbow. They teach me so much, whether it's just their own wolf behavior or how their ecosystem functions or how everything is connected. I also have many humans to thank. Lacey Hill-Castern, Adrian Treves, MNRD, and Bad River Tribe for all the opportunity and knowledge they've trusted with me. Zashi Gidnuding, Bob Shimmick, Edith Leoso, Peter David, Philomena Quebec, and Scout Baywis, Paul Demain, for trusting me to carry torches, and Marissa Lee for teaching me about plants in Anishinaabe Moen.